They told you hard work was the golden ticket, that waking up earlier, grinding longer, silently suffering, and pushing harder than everyone else would guarantee your success. That story was fed to you like a religion. Pain equals virtue, sleep is laziness, and ambition is measured in how burnt out you are. But what if I told you that this so-called work ethic might be exactly what's holding you back? Machiavelli wasn't some hard work worshipper. He studied it, saw straight through it, and uncovered a brutal truth. The most controllable person is the one who believes suffering is noble, not because they're weak, but because they're too busy chasing proof of their worth to ever question the system that benefits from exploiting them. Welcome to the hustle trap. And this isn't just some cultural myth, it's a weapon. The more disciplined, committed, and hard-working you are, the deeper the trap cuts. Let's start peeling back the layers, beginning with the first, turning survival into In Machiavelli's world, power didn't go to those who worked the hardest. Power was reserved for those who understood leverage. But here you are, taught to believe that effort alone is sacred, to pour more hours in, sacrifice more time, and take fewer breaks. You're told you're not lazy, you're loyal. But loyal to what? A machine that thrives on your exhaustion. This system knows that if it keeps dangling the next promotion, the next breakthrough, the next dopamine hit, you'll keep moving forward like a mule chasing a carrot. You'll never actually enjoy the reward. Machiavelli called this the strategic illusion. Feed the masses a sense of meaning through effort, and they won't even notice they're stuck. Not because they're weak, but because they've tied their identity to labor. And that's the real trap. When your self-image is built on being a hard worker, you'll defend the grind even when it's killing you. You'll attack rest as laziness. You'll see stillness as failure. And worst of all, you'll despise anyone who takes shortcuts, even if they win. Because deep down, you've been trained to connect struggle to morality. But Machiavelli, he'd laugh at that. He didn't believe in fairness. He believed in results, and he knew that the people in charge, they're not the ones working the hardest. They're the ones working the smartest. On you. Now, let's move on to the second layer. They make you proud of being used. Think about this. You clock in early. You stay late. You answer messages at midnight. You say yes when you want to say no. And what do you get back? Praise, not power. Recognition, not ownership. They hand you little rewards: employee of the month, a slightly bigger desk, a coffee voucher, as if those make up for the years and energy they've extracted from you. Here's the Machiavellian twist. They tell you this means you're valuable, but you're not. You're replaceable, conveniently compliant, because true value isn't about how hard you work. It's about how hard you are to control. The more obsessed you are with proving your work ethic, the less likely you are to challenge authority, to renegotiate, to walk away. And that's on purpose. The ideal worker isn't the most skilled, it's the one who believes sacrifice is virtue. They don't have to chain you up, they just have to make you willing. That's what Machiavelli would admire, not from a moral stance, but a strategic one. He knew that if you convince someone their suffering is meaningful, you can control them without chains, you can drain them without guilt, you can use them for a lifetime, and they'll thank you for the opportunity. Ready to dig into the darkest layer. The hustle trap's not just external, it becomes internalized. Even when there's no boss, no deadline, no one watching, you still grind. Why? Because now, it's not about accomplishing anything. It's about avoiding the shame of doing nothing. That's when the trap is complete. You're no longer chasing success. You're fleeing guilt. You've been wired to feel worthless when you rest, lazy when you pause, guilty when you're not producing. And inside that mental prison, you become your own warden. You push yourself harder, not because anyone asked, but because your own self-respect is tangled with exhaustion. You think that makes you strong, but it sends single quotes, too. It makes you predictable, and that means you can be manipulated, redirected, commodified, all without realizing it. That's the true genius of the hustle trap. It doesn't break your body, it breaks your sense of what truly matters. So, what would Machiavelli advise? He wouldn't tell you to stop working. He'd say stop being proud of being used. Understand this. Labor without leverage is slavery disguised as virtue. A person obsessed with proving their worth is easy to bait. Control isn't found in sacrifice, it's found in strategy. You don't win by working harder, you win by understanding who benefits when you do, and then deciding if they deserve it. When you wake up from the illusion that work equals value, you stop being a tool. You become a force. Real power doesn't belong to the ones who sweat it. Belongs to those who decide why you sweat, You see it everywhere, right? The startup founder glorifying those insane 100-hour weeks, the motivational speaker yelling about grinding while everyone else sleeps, corporate leaders dishing out just enough praise to keep you hooked on performance like it's a drug. But here's the kicker, it's all designed to make your exhaustion look like ambition. Spoiler alert, it's not ambition, it's obedience packaged as pride. This is exactly what Machiavelli saw again and again in every empire, kingdom, and rising power structure. The smartest control mechanism isn't brute force, it's belief. If you can get people to truly believe that working harder for you is in their best interest, they'll lock themselves in chains willingly. They will hustle harder than you could ever demand, literally burning themselves out just to light someone else's way, and they'll feel proud about it. So what's the next layer of this hustle trap? It's how the pressure works psychologically. You're told, quitting the grind means you're falling behind. Resting means someone hungrier is taking your spot. If you pause, someone else will swoop in and steal your chance. But ask yourself, who put that idea in your head? And what do they gain by making you believe it? Because here's the truth, no one will admit. The people at the very top, they don't hustle. They design the hustle. They build entire systems, factories of labor, and traps disguised as opportunity. They feed you dreams that keep you running on a treadmill, fooling you into thinking you're climbing a staircase. They also know exactly how to make you blame yourself when you eventually burn out. You'll think, maybe I didn't want it badly enough. Maybe I didn't work hard enough. Maybe I just need to suffer more. You take the failure on yourself, never realizing the game was rigged from the start, because no amount of hustle can replace your position, and no sacrifice can override the structure stacked against you. Machiavelli said people must either be used or broken. In today's world, being used feels safer. At least it comes with praise, recognition, and mild comforts. But it still drains you, leaves you hollow, replaceable. And the worst part, you start policing others who refuse to buy in. You judge the person who rests. You resent the one who refuses that 80-hour grind. You mock those who choose peace over pressure. Because deep down, if their choice is valid, yours starts to feel like a mistake. So you defend your chains as if they were your character. But he'd slice right through that nonsense. He'd say, the person who must constantly prove their value through suffering has already lost it. Real power doesn't live in the grind. It lives in the ability to opt out, to say no, to redirect, to change the game, or even build an entirely new one. And no, this isn't laziness. This is calculated movement. The king doesn't build a castle brick by brick. He commands, he positions, he aligns others around his vision. Because power isn't about physical labor, it's about mental leverage. So, ask yourself honestly, when was the last time your hard work made you rich? Not your boss, not a client, you. If the answer is never, or barely, then you're not working your being mind. You've been convinced to trade your energy, your years, your health, for what? A ladder you don't own, a system you didn't build, a reward that vanishes when the economy dips or the algorithm changes. This is why Machiavelli warned rulers to control belief, not just behavior. Once people believe sacrifice is noble, you don't need to force them to obey. They'll hustle till they burn out, while thanking you for the chance. Now, what's the way out? You have to become dangerous in a new way, not by grinding harder, not by shouting louder, but by being the one in the room who isn't desperate to prove anything. When others brag about sleeping 2 hours, you stay silent. When others flex their 18-hour days, you quietly ask, what is all that producing? When someone tells you to keep pushing, you look back and say, I can build something where I don't have to. This isn't arrogance, it's sovereignty. You stop buying into the virtue of suffering, and in doing so, you make yourself untouchable, because someone who needs nothing from the system cannot be controlled by it. Someone who doesn't flinch when called lazy, who doesn't crave validation through exhaustion, that person is terrifying. Not because they reject effort, but because they know when to stop pointless struggle. They work, but to own, not to serve. They strive, but only for something no one can ever take. And they understand what most never will. Freedom isn't in how hard you grind, it's in what you refuse to grind for. The cruel genius of the hustle trap. It doesn't just exhaust you, it distracts you. You chase perfection in your craft, argue for raises, fine-tune your calendar, and measure your worth by how much pain you endure. Meanwhile, the real power players move silently. They're not asking, how do I work harder? They're asking, Who can I get to work for me? This is the Machiavellian mind, cold, clear, free of moral fairy tales. While the masses compete to be seen as the hardest workers, the strategist competes for influence, ownership, and leverage. Those are the real currencies that decide how much work actually matters. But here's the brutal truth. Most people never escape the hustle trap because they're addicted to the identity it gives them. They don't know who they are without the grind. That the hustle isn't just a schedule, it's a personality. I don't have time to rest. I'm always working. I'm chasing the dream. But what is that dream? For many, it's vague. Just some abstract idea of success that never actually arrives. It's not something they own or define. It's just chased endlessly. This is what Machiavelli would call weaponized ambition. When your hunger to succeed guarantees you never will, you become predictable, easy to use, and easy to feed. They give you tasks, and you call it progress. They give you promotions, and you call it growth. They give you visibility, and you call it legacy. But all they've done is keep you running, chasing, instead of stopping long enough to realize you're on a leash. Here's the Machiavellian pivot you need to make. Stop thinking like a laborer. Start thinking like a king. A king doesn't ask, how can I work more hours? He asks, how can I build something that outlasts me? How can I get others to align with my goals without ever needing to command them? It's not about avoiding work. It's about shifting from manual labor to strategic control. Because effort alone, that's a commodity. Everyone can trade time for effort. But vision, that's rare. That's the thing people follow, fund, and protect. So ask yourself, what have you built that cannot be taken away? What system do you own that works even when you're not there? What are you doing that multiplies your time instead of draining it? Because if your hustle only works when you show up, then you don't own your time. You've leased your body. And that's the quiet slavery of modern ambition, the illusion of making progress while staying stuck in the same place. Now, here's the next level. Social reinforcement. You're not just trapped by your own mindset. You're trapped by the people around you addicted to the same game. They brag about sleepless nights. They romanticize burnout. They guilt-trip you for taking a break. They measure your worth by how grindy you seem. And because you don't want to look soft, you perform for them. You suffer loudly. You stay so busy everyone notices. You conform quietly. But you believe you're unique. The Machiavellian doesn't play that game. He doesn't compete on virtue or who's the hardest worker. He competes on results, while everyone else burns fuel for applause and likes. He's burning fuel for infrastructure, while others chase claps. He's building something they'll beg to be part of someday. Because here's the truth. No one remembers how hard you worked. They remember what you built, not how many all-nighters you pulled, but what you left behind when you were done. And if all you leave behind is exhaustion, constant striving, and never enough, that's not freedom. That's just being well-behaved. And the world, it doesn't reward obedience. It uses it. So from here on out, you have to pivot. You stop measuring your value by hours worked. You start measuring it by impact made. You stop vying for recognition. You design systems that matter. You stop selling your time like a beggar. You move like an owner, even if all you own is a single strategic idea. Because once you do, everything changes. You no longer panic if others outwork you. You stop chasing speed. You chase scale. And you don't need praise anymore, because you've built something far louder than your voice. That's when you escape the trap, not because you stopped working, but because you're finally working for yourself. Here's what they'll never teach you in school, at work, or in any motivational seminar. The people at the top don't hustle for power. They design systems where everyone hustles for them. They build invisible ladders, letting others die trying to climb, because they know it's never about how hard you work. It's about where your work goes. For most people, it goes upwards, feeding someone else's legacy, the founder, the investor, the brand, or the algorithm. You build, sacrifice, give everything, and in the end, you don't own what you made. You were just a part of it. That's what Machiavelli would call a functional pawn. Useful, ambitious, even brilliant, but ultimately disposable. Why? Because pawns focus on movement. Kings focus on position. If you're always moving, always grinding, always reacting, you never get the chance to stop and ask, where am I actually going? And that's not a mistake, it's the feature. The busier they keep you, the less dangerous you become, because stillness reveals strategy. They can't afford for you to get Strategic, so they glorify the grind, they meme it, they build an entire culture around hustle. They make you wear your burnout like a badge of honor. And in that blur of constant activity, they never worry you'll peek behind the curtain. Here's the Machiavellian secret. The ultimate power move isn't working more, it's making your work count more than anyone else's. Your time is limited, your energy is finite, but your structure, that scalable, a well-placed boundary protects you longer than a sleepless night. One no can secure more freedom than a year of yeses. One system, one network, one ownership model can replace thousands of hours of mindless hustle, but most never reach this level. Why? Because they're afraid of what happens if they stop moving. They fear stillness, they fear missing out, they fear becoming irrelevant, and most of all, they fear facing the truth because they've built their identity around being useful to someone else's machine. Once you see this clearly, you face a choice. Do you keep running in circles, or do you stop cold, unapologetically, and start building your own system? This is when you become terrifying to the system, when you stop playing their game and start creating your own. When you set your own rules, filter your inputs, pick your battles wisely, and watch as those still stuck in the grind mock you, doubt your discipline, question your decisions, but you don't flinch. Because you've moved beyond discipline, you've moved into design. Where your moves aren't reactive, they're intentional. Where you don't hustle for freedom, you design freedom first, and your hustle only follows if it amplifies that freedom. Most won't get this, they'll call you lucky. Say you sold out, tell you real work means pain, stress, and endless hustle. But Machiavelli would smirk, knowing the ones who mock freedom usually just fear claiming it. And that brings us to the final truth, the closing move of this entire conversation. Not just how to escape the hustle trap, but how to become the person who can never be trapped again. Here's the truth the system hopes you never figure out. Once you escape the hustle trap, you become a threat. Not because you're stronger or louder, but because you're no longer dependent. You stop craving recognition for how hard you work. You no longer ask permission to rest. You refuse to buy into the idea that your value must be proven through exhaustion. In a world addicted to constant motion, your stillness becomes terrifying, because stillness is where real power begins. It's where you see what everyone else misses, the people profiting off your grind, what you're really building, where the leverage lies. You realize the game was never about effort. It's about extraction now. You start moving like a strategist. You speak less and listen more. You don't rush to prove yourself because your value no longer comes from what you give away, but from what you hold back. That's what Machiavelli meant when he warned against being too available, too eager, or too obedient. He wasn't against effort. He was against effort without control. Because labor without leverage is servitude. Ambition without ownership is just performative struggle. So now, you shift. You stop chasing external validation. You stop competing in someone else's game. Your moves become calculated, intentional. You design your own path. And when others mock your stillness or question your discipline, you don't flinch. Because you've entered the zone where discipline meets design, where you don't hustle for freedom. You design freedom first, and hustle only if it amplifies that freedom. Most people won't understand this. They'll call you lucky. Say you sold out. Tell you that real success means pain, hustle, sacrifice. But Machiavelli would smirk, knowing that the ones who mock freedom are usually the ones most afraid to claim it. Now imagine the kind of power that comes with that mindset, not the kind that burns you out physically, but the kind that moves silently behind the scenes. The real players don't broadcast their grind. They don't brag about sleepless nights or 18-hour days. They ask, who can I get to work for me? How can I multiply my effort through others? Because influence, ownership, and leverage are the true measures of power. And here's a cold, hard truth. Most people never escape the hustle trap because they're addicted to the identity it gives them. They don't know who they are without it. The grind becomes their personality. I don't have time to rest. I'm always working. I'm chasing the dream. But what is that dream? For many it's vague, abstract. Just some distant idea of success that never arrives. They don't own it. They don't define it. They just chase it endlessly. This is what Machiavelli would call weaponized ambition. Your desire to succeed becomes the very thing that keeps you from succeeding. You become easy to predict, easy to use, easy to feed. They give you tasks, and you call it progress. They give you promotions, and you call it growth. They give you visibility, and you call it legacy. But what they're really doing is keeping you chasing, never stopping long enough to see that you're on a leash. Here's the Machiavellian move that will truly set you free. Stop thinking like a pawn. Start thinking like a king. A pawn focuses on movement, always reacting, always grinding, always chasing whatever comes next. A king focuses on position, setting the pace, and controlling the board. If you're constantly busy, constantly moving, you never get the chance to think deeply about where you're really headed. That's not a flaw, it's the whole point. The busier they keep you, the less dangerous you are, because true strategy requires stillness, and stillness terrifies them. So they glorify hustle culture. They build an entire aesthetic around the grind. They make burnout look like a badge of honor. Meanwhile, behind the curtain, the true power players are quietly making their moves, because the ultimate power play isn't to work harder, it's to make your work count more than anyone else's. Your time is limited, your energy is finite, but your systems, those are scalable. A well-placed boundary will protect you longer than a sleepless night. Saying no once can buy you more freedom than a year of saying yes. One strong system, one network of influence, one smart ownership model can replace thousands of hours of mindless work. But most people never get there. Why? Because they're terrified of what happens if they stop moving. They fear stillness. They fear missing out. They fear irrelevance. And above all, they fear facing the truth. They've built their entire identity around being useful to someone else's machine. So here you stand, at the crossroads. Do you keep running the rat race? Or do you stop entirely cold, unapologetic, and start building your own empire? When you do that, you become a threat like no other. You stop playing their game and start designing your own. You set your own rules, filter your input, choose your battles with care. You watch as those still trapped in the grind mock you. They doubt your discipline. They question your choices. But you don't flinch, because now you aren't just disciplined, you're a designer of your life. You don't hustle for freedom, you create freedom. First, and only hustle if it makes your freedom bigger. Most won't understand that. They'll say you're lucky, they'll say you sold out. That real work is supposed to hurt. That hustle equals success, and rest is weakness. But he'd just smirk, because those who mock freedom are almost always too scared to claim it. Here's the final, brutal truth. Freedom doesn't come from grinding harder. It comes from stepping back, seeing the whole board, knowing exactly when to move on, when to stay perfectly still. As you grow quieter and more intentional, people will start to notice, not for your exhaustion, but for your control. This is the ultimate power move, not by sweating the most, by controlling the most. You've escaped the hustle trap because you stopped hustling for someone else's dreams. You're finally working for your own.